clue to this marker is, yikes. Of all the historical events, legends, tales, and haunted stories, one sticks out above them all in Belmont County. In 1869, a young girl's life was cut short due to an obsessed, violent, and outright evil coal miner. This is one of our more unique memorial visits in our cemetery travels, and that we're physically visiting the site of an 1800s murder event. Today, we learn the tragic story of a young, never-meant-to-be bride, Louiza Catharine Fox. A little backstory on this sad one, and even more tragically, I read more information about the murderer rather than the young victim. And the murderer? He's a real piece of work, so pour yourself a glass of wine or beer, maybe orange juice for you, for this story. But we'll start off at the beginning to set the stage. Let's meet Thomas Carr, a man with a history full of lies, deceit, murder, robbing, arson, you name it, he claimed it. Carr was born in Sugar Hill, West Virginia in 1846. He had 5 brothers and 3 sisters. Growing up, his father was abusive towards him, which caused Thomas to develop his own anger issues, often fighting with other children. As he grew up, he did odd jobs, mainly hanging out with bricklayers and river workers, and this is where he kind of gets involved with the wrong crowd. I read in 1854, he was sent to prison for unknown reasons. During his stay, he claimed that he became friends with 2 men in prison named John Burns and Oscar Myers, who were on trial for the murder of a woman. John Barnes would be sentenced to death, but Oscar Myers, interesting name, was sentenced to life. Thomas Carr claims that during a prison visit, he slips Myers some poison to kill himself, but then states he was too cowardly to do it. After this spectacle, Carr's family moved to Belmont County, where we're visiting today. Upon turning 16, he joined the Ohio Infantry Regiment during the Civil War. Thomas Carr had a bad reputation, though, and was constantly in trouble. During his 2 weeks of training, he got into 5 fights. At one point, he was assigned to guard prisoners, and he broke out of the barracks instead and went to go meet a girl. He was often arrested, and in 2 cases, due to his desertion behavior, he was ordered to be shot. He was also ordered to dig his own grave. Apparently, he wasn't even concerned as he dug it out and seemed fine with his fate. He would be pardoned by Lincoln, and in his own words, upon returning to the regiment, the boys welcomed me, who treated me well as ever. Perhaps delusional. He was known to loot dead bodies of soldiers during the Civil War, take rings, money, and watches, just anything he could get his hand on. And how did this man prepare for battle? Got drunk off whiskey. He believed the liquor braced up his nerves. Liquid courage, in other words. We've all been there. However, he heads down a crash course, and I'll just bullet point these experiences here, and there's quite a bit. One night, he wanders away from the regiment camp to drink. A citizen tries to arrest him, and Carr shoots him in the chest. That man dies a day later. While in prison, he learns that a man is planning to join the Confederates, guessing they offered prisoners that option back then. But Carr and 2 other Union soldiers strangle the man to death. He gets discharged, but man, he signs right back up for the Civil War. It's like he loved the Civil War environment, thrived in chaos and death. However, he does get in trouble when he shoots a prostitute. He then takes part in the Battle of Franklin and apparently kills and robs 2 men randomly. More alarmingly, he seems to take pride in randomly murdering unsuspecting rebel soldiers. At one point, he hides behind a tree and murders a rebel sergeant just walking by. While guarding a prisoner who tries to escape, Carr doesn't apprehend him like, hey, stop there in the name of the law. He just kills him. Just any chance to kill, he's on it. He claims that he was one of the 11 men who raided a merchant in Virginia and stomped the man to death. A black waiter apparently refused to give him food while boarded on a steamer. Carr just randomly throws him overboard. Just acts of violence and whatever. When boarding a streetcar, Carr refuses to pay. The conductor confronts him like, hey buddy, you gotta pay. And that ends up with the conductor's ear nearly severed off as Carr attacks him. The driver of the streetcar attempts to help. Carr just stabs him in the stomach, and that man ends up dying. Post-war, he's hanging out in Wheeling, West Virginia, and gets mixed up with a German traveler who requests that the help of Carr in murdering his companion, guessing a business partner maybe, he wants his cut. Carr helps as they murder the man with a hatchet and loot his body. Oddly enough, the German traveler is hanged due to his action. Carr, however, once again eludes the consequences. Apparently, Carr is so ridden with so much guilt for all the things he's done that you just learned, he begins talking in his sleep. And this causes him to develop a fear of confessing. Like maybe he's saying, oh, I shouldn't have killed that person. Like he's really noticing, like he's freaking out. Maybe someone will hear his words and report it to the police. After all, he's made it this far. So he flees from Wheeling and heads to Belmont County, Ohio, where we are today. Now that we've been introduced to the lovely Thomas Carr, let's meet Louiza Catharine Fox, who was born in 1855. Unsure where exactly. However, her death is listed as dying in 1869 in Egypt, Ohio. Regardless, she was a young girl who lived with her parents, John and Mary Fox, on their farm east of Sewellsville, Ohio. I couldn't understand how to say that. But that town is pretty close to this site, like 9 minutes by car to give you an idea. Louisa, even in her young age, was employed by Alexander Hunter, who was a local coal mine owner. Coincidentally, Thomas Carr was also an employee of Alexander Hunter, and I'm sure you know where this is going. Thomas Carr, now around 22 years old, becomes extremely infatuated and obsessed with a 13-year-old girl. Gross. To the point he often stalks her, contacts her parents, wanting to propose to her. Louisa would tell him no a few times, in fact. Probably something along the lines like, bro, I'm like 13. Now, I did read the parents originally approved of it, then called it off after they determined that she was just too young to marry, so good call there. And some knowledge of Carr's previous violent history comes to light. So what does Carr do? He steals a razor from the local shoemaker shop and says, we'll see about that. He makes his way to the home of Mrs. Hunter, where Louisa was employed as a servant girl during the time. I read a note that he lies to her and states that he visited her parents and they want her home so they can visit her grandparents. He does take a shot again, asking Louisa to marry him, and for the 500th time, she shockingly refuses. Following this rejection, Carr drinks 4 bottles of hard cider, good God, man, and learns that Louisa is indeed on her way to her grandparents' house. He decides to hide and wait for her along the road, but at one point he decides he doesn't want to use a razor anymore. He just wants to shoot her outright. So he apparently stops by houses and asks to borrow a gun. No one has one, so he returns to these very fields with razor in hand. Upon doing that, he sees tracks and realizes they belong to the young girl. He runs up a hill and hides behind a fence. At this time, she is walking with her younger brother, Wiley. She would notice Carr hiding behind the fence as he approached her. The two would apparently talk for quite some time, and Carr would tell the younger brother, head down the road. Her and Carr exchanged words, both breaking down crying at one point, and they were just arguing. There's a ravine mentioned in the story, which I'm assuming is close to here. The story I read states that she was wishing death given the circumstances and trouble she was facing. Carr grabs her by the forearm and asks her if she's ready to die. Guessing he was going to throw her down the ravine maybe, she does plead for her life. He then kisses her goodbye, then pulls out the razor and begins to slash her neck, hitting the jugular vein. It is said the cut was said to be 10 inches long and 2 inches deep. He then goes on to stab her 14 more times, mainly on a rage at this point, I'm guessing. Keep in mind during all of this, Louisa's younger brother is watching the whole thing take place, and luckily runs home to tell his parents of the unfortunate event. Thomas Carr disposed of Louisa's body in a ditch on the side of the road in this very area. Post-murdering, Carr goes up to an oak tree and he debates taking his own life with the razor. He doesn't follow through though, but I read that he got a gun and was planning on going after Mrs. Hunter next. He blamed her solely for the engagement being broken off for some reason. Upon heading into town, he sees an entire posse, who is most likely looking for him. He randomly roams a bit through the woods and sees various people at the murder site. Why he's hanging around, I'm not sure. He cocks his gun and he's ready to avoid arrest or capture. I mean, he's willing to go out swinging. But for some reason, people just pass him by, not suspecting anything. He actually goes to the Fox residence and sees that people are going in and out of the house. And he sees the body of Louisa Fox lying, being dressed up by doctors. He then waits, observing her lifeless body through the kitchen window. This next part, this is screwed up, man. He did plan on entering the house as he felt the need to shake Louisa's hand and kiss her one last time. Carr's comments get a little darker in that Louisa's corpse was pale, but the most beautiful corpse he's ever seen. Yeah. He then goes to a hideout. I think there's a mention of a coal bunker in this area. A note mentions he was planning to visit her corpse the next day, but he suspected he'd be identified and caught at that point. At this point, he decides to kill himself. He ties up a handkerchief and points the muzzle at his chest, planning on hitting his heart. He triggers the gun, and the bullet fires into him. Just missing his heart, though. It doesn't take him out, though, and he walks to a nearby spring to get a drink. By then, a group of men are heard shouting, "Murderer," over and over, making a beeline to him. Carr then takes the razor out of his pocket and begins slashing at his throat, apparently cutting his windpipe so badly he loses a lot of blood and passes out. However, He lives, and in June of 1869, a 5-day trial takes place. During his trial, he attempts to off himself again, cutting his veins, but that fails. He is eventually found guilty for the murder of Louiza Fox and is sentenced to hanging. Upon hearing the verdict, he laughs apparently and doesn't seem to care if it's tomorrow. However, due to an error, he ends up being in prison for a year waiting to be hanged. While in jail, he confesses to several murders, 14 to be exact. He was suspected to be a bit of an exaggerator, but we'll never know. He does, however, admit to killing the young Louiza Fox. To add insult to the Fox family, he reported a request to be executed close to the Fox family house and be buried in the same cemetery as Louiza. Bold request. She is buried in Salem Cemetery, by the way, in Ohio. Finally, we arrived on March 24th, 1870, where Carr is awaiting to be taken to the gallows to be hanged. If you can believe this, I found another creepy note in this whole story. Apparently, 2 young teenage girls become captivated by Carr. They think he's hot or something, and they visit him in jail. He gives them a photo of himself and random silver rings, tells them to remember him, and he'll see them in the afterlife in heaven to be reunited. Ugh, creepy. He apparently even checks out the gallows and begins doing acrobatics on it, sort of in good spirits about the whole thing. He even compliments the sheriff. Great job on the structure, bro. A thumbs up. Guy is just nuts. Upon standing on the scaffold, he goes into a long, drawn-out speech about how the whiskey is to blame for all this. Banish the whiskey, he says. The public was like, yeah, we're not going to stop drinking. Can we hang this guy already? He said a short prayer, and the trapdoor was open. Carr's neck didn't snap, though, and he slowly strangled, and then eventually died. A fitting death. Carr was the first and only individual ever hanged in Belmont County, from my readings. Later on, the hearse carriage that took Carr to his final resting place was said to be cursed. Carr is said to be buried at Methodist Cemetery in Saint Clairsville, Ohio. It's an unmarked grave, but a label on the final grave says Plot 137. Well, it is October. Some legends obviously attached to this horrific event in this area. Local residents reported strange events around this area post the murder and hanging. They reported seeing the ghost of a girl weeping near this site. More specifically, the memorial stone, and we'll go see that in a little bit. Whether a legend just created from a horrible murder of an innocent girl, I'm not sure. Unfortunately, some say the ghost of Thomas Carr has been seen roaming the area as well, almost as if he's continuing to stalk his never-to-be bride in the afterlife. Hopefully all of that is just old ghost stories meant to scare children around the campfire. This trip was definitely one of the more detailed and in-depth stories we've come across, so I hope I didn't bore the hell out of you. Most of the stuff I read or watched online relating to this event was really kind of paranormal based. This channel, my style is more to gather as much info as I can to present the whole story and the historical events, background. It's a good sleep app if you have trouble sleeping. But truly one of the most tragic visits in our cemetery travels. Thanks for watching. Hope you found some interesting tidbits in this story, as a memorial sits alone in a remote location of Ohio. Apparently based on local folklore. Still active, if even the spirit world stuff. And we'll give you a little mini tour here. Do not come when it's raining or snowing. Don't be a dummy like me. Come during a very dry time. But it looks like people leave little things sort of Louiza, which is kind of cool to see. Leave it there for you to read for a little bit. Unfortunately, it looks like people are writing on it too. Bears and stuff. Little unicorn. Duck in a bag, hair tie. Bud Light sticker thing. I don't know what that is. But quite possibly the most unique memorial site we've seen. Probably one of the saddest stories we've seen. I'll have to find something to leave for her. Anywho, hope you enjoyed this story. It's a sad one, but if you're out in the middle of nowhere in Ohio, feel free to stop by and see Fox's little memorial here. Thanks for watching.